Recording stopped.
Good morning. Today is the 14th of Nisan, and this is a Yom Tov in itself. It's a special day in and of itself, and the reason it's special is because now here in Israel at this time we would have been bringing the Paschal offering, the Paschal lamb, to the temple to be prepared for the Seder tonight. And because of that, from the middle of the day and on, it's considered to be like a Yom Tov. You see, by Hasidim, they wear a shtreimel in the second half of the day. And it's considered to be a special time. And we're going to be looking at the fourth reading of Parshas Shemini. And if you remember from last time, Nadav and Avihu passed away. And it was a very, very difficult situation. So in yesterday's reading, we didn't talk about it yesterday, we didn't have time, that when Aaron heard about this, and Moshe Rabbeinu explained to him why this might have happened, then it says, and Aaron was silent. Vayidom Aaron. He had no words to say, which is a very clear indication of mourning, of pain. And obviously, when a person is given such news that his two children have passed away, this is the natural response, not to be able to say anything. Especially because Moses told him that the reason was because God had told them that the consecration of the temple, that the consecration of the tabernacle, would involve some kind of sacrifice from Moshe and Aaron. It wasn't clear what the sacrifice would be. God didn't say what it would be. And we explained yesterday that Nadav and Avihu, they thought that they understood what they were doing, correct in their premise, and yet, because they had not been commanded by God to do so, it was considered to be a desecration of the tabernacle. What we want to look at today, and this is in relation to Pesach, and it's what we've been building up to this week, is we said that at a certain level, a person cannot do things entirely, even if they're sure that they're right. There are certain things that need to be said by God, as it were. Some things need to, as it were, come from above. They can't just be my ambition. They can't just be what I think is right and what I believe to be true. And even if I'm correct, that they are right and true. Why is this? Passover night is a night on which our perspective changes. That's what's special about this evening. The evening, this is the one time of the year, that's how it's explained in the Arizal and in Zohar and Chassidus. This is the one time of year that we can take the perspective of God instead of our own limited perspective. In a certain sense, the Egypt that we're coming out of is the Egypt of our personal limited point of view on reality. And that point of view, as important as it is, and as necessary as it is obviously very, very limited. And eventually, it also ends. But on this night, it says that God revealed Himself, not through an angel, not through a messenger, but He Himself revealed Himself in the way that He will be revealed in the future. And what will be revealed in the future is that every human being will be able to understand the divine perspective. And this is a tremendous leap of consciousness. Pesach means a leap. So we know that God leapt over, but what does it have to do with us? Why do we call it Pesach? We should call it, like we say, the holiday of matzah, Chag HaMatzot, the holiday of eating matzah. But we also call it Chag HaPesach, not just because God leapt over or skipped over the houses of the Jews, but also because on this night we have a chance to skip over, to leap over our limited consciousness and come to a recognition of how the world looks and what events are like from God's perspective. That is the great thing about Pesach, which we don't have any other time of the year. That's why the sages say, if there's any time of the year that's ready, that's predetermined, that's auspicious for the coming of the redemption, and the redemption is the change in our consciousness, it's Pesach evening. It's the first night of Pesach. It's the only night during the entire year that we say Hallel in the night, because what we're doing is it's like we're understanding the reasons for everything. And there's a famous Hasidic saying that on Pesach, when you sit and you think about what has happened to you during the entire past year, you feel that everything was proper and in its place. That's why we call it Seder. Seder means to order things. So it's not just that we order the table and we have a Haggadah that tells us when to do what and when to say what. It's also that it brings order into one's life. It's an opportunity, when you look at things from God's perspective, to be able to understand that everything that happened to me this year was in the correct order, in the correct place. It's something that I myself now agree with, even though it could be that during the year I was angry at it and upset about it. But now when I come to, like Aaron in this situation, Aaron is not only quiet because he is in mourning, because he's in pain. He's also, as the sages say, when you tell someone something and they don't reply, it's a sign that they accept it. Sometimes you have to criticize someone. And if they're able to take the criticism, they hear it, and they listen, and they internalize it, and they don't say anything back. That's the type of silence that Aaron had. He said, yes, I see that this is, even from my perspective, but I see the divine perspective that says that this is part of the story of the unfolding of the world. And I am fortunate, and I agree with the fact that this is the story that is being told through me, that this is how my life looks. And that's the great thing about Pesach, that we have an opportunity to enjoy and see the world from God's perspective and be able to accept it all as a necessary part of the unfolding of history. And it's not just from my point of view. My point of view is very limited. But seeing things in the greater context and being able to say, yes, this is part of that story. Because we're elevating to that level, there's a very interesting thing that we do, which is we don't eat leavened bread. Why? Because it says in the Talmud something very interesting, that the child does not develop a separate consciousness until they start eating bread, until they start eating from the 5 types of grain which are made into bread. The matzah that we eat is not leavened, meaning it doesn't get a chance to come to the point where it adds to our self-consciousness. Instead, it sustains us without adding to self-consciousness. That's why the deeper meaning of why it's a mitzvah, but we also explain why this mitzvah is, that we eat matzah during these 7 days because we're lessening the amount of self-consciousness that we have in order to see things from God's perspective. So that was what Aaron experienced after the death of his 2 children. He was elevated to that level. It was very near, it was the 8th day, so it was only the 8th day of Nisan. It wasn't yet the Pesach itself. But if they died on the 8th, the day on which he ended his mourning was like today, the 14th, and on the 15th he celebrated Pesach with everyone else. Meaning these days were like the days of the elevation of his consciousness to the point where he could accept the destiny of his children and understand that this is part of the grand story. And when you are able to do that, you come out of Egypt. You come into freedom. Because the greatest freedom we can have is the freedom from our limited self-consciousness, that we see the world in the greater perspective. So I wish everyone a Chag Kasher v'Sameach, a very joyous and kosher Passover. And It's joyous because it's kosher, because the joy is really the joy, like of saying Hallel at night, is that I'm now becoming one with the divine consciousness. I'm now able to see things from a much higher perspective than I am during the rest of the year. So Chag Kasher v'Sameach, and I'll see you, God willing, on Sunday. Bye bye. Chag Sameach.